Hello, and welcome to Unleash Monday, where we talk about the brain, especially the gifted brain, and how does it affect our thinking and experience of the world differently. There are a lot of stereotypes and stigma around giftedness, and I'm here to challenge those. I'm here to raise awareness and to have a conversation around this topic of what does it mean to be a gifted adult. Common experience among gifted folks is that they feel out of place. They don't quite fit in. They are too sensitive, too intense, too emotional, too overexcitable, and too deep thinkers about the world and about themselves. So if you have been called too much about anything, then this show is for you. My name is Nadia. I'm too loud, too colorful, too bubbly, too bossy, and I love to talk too much. So welcome to my world, and I'm so happy you are here. Hello, and happy Monday. I'm so excited you're here. Welcome. So today I want to talk a little bit about the topic of twice exceptionality, also known as 2E. And 2E stands for being gifted plus having a learning difference. That can be something like ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and it affects a lot of people. And a lot of them, especially in adulthood, don't know about it. And we have a lot of stereotypes around gifted people and autistic people. And the first image, I think, for especially my generation is always Rain Man. Dustin Hoffman pops into our head. And Dustin Hoffman is not autistic. He played an autistic character. But there are a lot of real world examples out there who are actually twice exceptional and do have autism, such as Elon Musk. He recently said on Saturday Night Live that he has Asperger's. And nowadays, as I learned, Asperger's is not its own category. It all falls under the autism spectrum disorder, ASD. So basically, Elon Musk is a twice exceptional adult. He is on the autism spectrum and he's gifted. And there are a lot of other examples, but again, famous people, when we hear about this, it's again mostly men, white men. And I want to create awareness around this topic, especially also in women and people of color, because it doesn't only affect white men. And it's very interesting how I learn from women that they get diagnosed with autism quite late in life. And today's guest is also one of these examples. And before we dive in, I want to quickly remind you of the first ever 2E Adult Conference, which will premiere and launch on the 1st of November, 2021. However, you can also access all the recordings afterwards if you purchase the access. But on the 1st of November, it's absolutely free. Julie Skolnick, who has been on the show, she created this awesome platform, Let's Talk to E, and she created this really amazing conference. There's a lot of impressive speakers, and I was invited to speak amongst these really incredible people who have done a lot of work and research and contributed to this field. So if you want to access it, then go to the show notes and click on the link. I do have an affiliate link. So if you purchase it through my link, then I do get a little contribution from that purchase. Otherwise, you can also go to Let's Talk to E directly conferences and buy it directly from Julie Skolnick. So I hope you enjoyed that. But today we have Lucy Knight on the show. And Lucy, she learned that she is autistic at the age of 31, and only after she's been pressing her doctor to dig deeper and find out why she has such difficulties coping. So it was really self-driven, but she will share her empowering story of her late diagnosis and how it empowers her. And even though she doesn't say she's gifted, she does say she's smart. And I think she associated it with being autistic. But again, autism and giftedness can go hand in hand, but it doesn't have to be. So if people are autistic and are gifted, then we do speak of twice exceptionality. So let's hear from Lucy and how she experienced her journey through school and then especially through employment, and how she learned to advocate for herself and now is really happy with her current situation and her amazing employer. So without further ado, here is Lucy. Welcome, Lucy. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So I found you through LinkedIn because I now follow the hashtags and other people that are working in the neurodivergent space. And there was also this Autism Awareness Week, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's April, so it's Autism Awareness Month. It goes on for a month. So yeah, it's normally around April time, but there's a lot of autistics now saying about autism acceptance. They're trying to move it on from awareness to acceptance now.
Okay, so see, I learn already a lot of things and say learning the terms because I'm kind of like, using the old vocabulary. So that's when I saw you posted an article that you wrote, and it really, really touched me. And it's called "The Trials and Tribulations of a Life Without a Diagnosis." So you are, I would guess, in your 30s, and you only learned very recently that you are autistic. And you said it helped you figure out, like, navigate more and advocate better for yourself, especially in the work environment. So where should we start? Do you want to start like sharing your story, or by the diagnosis and then looking back of like how your life was without the diagnosis?
Yeah, so basically like all through school and like even early employment, I was really intelligent. So, I do really well at school. I didn't really struggle academically at school. I got good results and I always had good relationships with my teachers, but I didn't have the same kind of relationships with my peers because I was quite strong-minded and focused on certain things. So my goals were to, get good grades, go to university, and I was not easily distracted by things like, smoking at high school or going out drinking. It just didn't really, for that reason, you obviously become a bit of an outcast because that's basically what quite a few people tend to do or navigate towards. But I tended to go more towards my passions. So it was sports, things like that. So I was a member of a lot of clubs, and that's where I was able to find friends because it was basically about doing hobbies and interests with similar minded people that were also doing hobbies and interests. So I got my social interaction from, my running club or going swimming club and things like that. That's where I would basically make all of my friendship connections. And then in school, I always had small groups of friends, never large groups of friends, but I was well known from my academic and sporting achievements throughout the school. It's just I chose to keep my friendship groups really small. So there would only ever be like 6 people in a group. And it was normally always boys that I was friends with. It was very rare that I was, friends with a group of girls because I just find girls very difficult to, and women in general, they're very layered. We're very layered human beings. So they're quite hard to read. And I just couldn't really navigate very well with women unless they were kind of more like a tomboy, or if that's the correct term, like so a bit more like, into boys things and stuff like that. So a lot of my like girlfriends tend to be also quite sporty or into similar things that I'm into. And then when I left school and went into employment, that was kind of my first taste of, oh, maybe something's not quite right here. So I took up a job when I was 16. It was for like a well-known retailer over in the UK. But I treated it like school. So at school, obviously, if you work hard, turn up on time, like speak to your teachers in a really professional way and show that you're willing, you tend to get on quite well in school. But employment is the complete opposite to that. It's a bit weird. Like you go and you turn up on time and you follow the rules. It's very like black and white for me. So I follow the rules and do what I think is right. I thought, oh, I'm doing okay here. Like, I think it's good. And I've brought opinions to it. And because obviously at school, when teachers ask you things, you're allowed to question them. But in employment, if a manager asks you something, it's like you can't question it, because then it's like you're seen as being difficult, or like if they say something to you and you're just like, well, that doesn't make sense. What are you doing that for? And it's a bit like, well, why are you saying that? Why do you think that doesn't make sense? And when I had my performance review, I was expecting it to be really good, because that's what I was used to at school. It was always like really good. So I wasn't expecting any differently, and it was terrible. It was like, you don't interact with customers very well. You don't, you struggle to fit into the team. It was all just like it wasn't positive at all. So I was like, oh, I'm going to lose my job. They're like, no, we'll work on it. Don't worry. And this, that, and the other. And when I took the interview, I said to them, like, I do have a lot of sporting activities after, like, in the evening. So I'd really appreciate if you didn't rota me in on these certain days. And one of the weeks they'd rotated me in every single day, where I'd have like a sporting event or sporting activity or something like that. So I was like, oh, do you mind if I change that? Because, I've got college and stuff like that. And they were like, yeah, no worries, leave it with us. And then they took my name off the rota, because I went to have a look, and then they were like, oh, can we have a word? And then they basically just said, it's not working out, and you have an answer for everything, and let me go. And it was my first taste of, oh my God, I've done really well at school, and here I am getting sacked from a simple retail job. It was a big shock to the system, and it really knocked my confidence. So for a while after that, I didn't work. It was about 6 months when I got my next job, and it was a totally different environment. It was just in a warehouse, and it was like an order picker. And I actually quite liked it, because you'd go in and you got a sheet, and you basically just got on with it. You just picked clothes from different coordinates, and then it was quite structured. You had a half an hour break, and then you went home. But it was only a temporary job, so it only lasted for about 3 months. And then I worked for another retailer a few months after that, a really well-known one, and I was there for 5 years, believe it or not. I learned from my past experiences at the first one. It was basically like, right, I'm just going to keep my head down, not get involved with any, not be outspoken, not be anything, just follow it to the T, be really polite. And my managers kept saying to me, you're so polite, you're so well-mannered. And I was like, oh, yeah, no worries. I just didn't want them to find out, I'd actually been sacked from my first employment, and didn't want, any misgivings. But what I found in that job was I had managers that actually liked me and appreciated the fact that, I was a bit out there and quirky, but I was hardworking, and they seemed to like appreciate that more than my ability to do things. They liked the fact I'd get stuck in, and I'd work anywhere in the store, and put me on a few courses and things like that. So, but they always said, like, we know you're not like this material. We know you're not destined to be here forever. And I think it was just this mutual understanding of, I was there just doing my best whilst I was working there through university, and it was something temporary for me. I was going to go on, because the thing is, like, without a diagnosis, you kind of look at other people and go, well, what I need to do is get a degree from university and then go and work in an office. And looking back on that, I think if I'd have had a diagnosis, I would not have gone into office work at all, because for me, it's an absolute sensory nightmare. And I just thought noises like, typing on a keyboard, or really just irritating noises that really irritate me, like to the point where I get really angry, I just thought I'd grow out of it. I thought it's just a phase, it's just hormones, it's just teenage angst, I'll grow out of it. And even for university, I'd go to the library at 11 p.m. at night, because that was the time when no one else was there. So I could like just really, get on with what I needed to get on with, because it was quiet. But if you'd have put me in that environment in the middle of the day, I'd have been like, oh no, I can't cope with this. I'm going to have to like just leave. And my brother actually sent me a thing. So I had this thing when I was younger. I couldn't stand it when he tapped his bowl with his spoon. I just could not stand it at all. And he sent me a link and said, this is what you have. And it was misophonia. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, that is me. That's what I have. And I went to the doctors and was like, have you ever heard of misophonia? And they're like, no, must be a new thing. Never heard of that. And I was like, well, I think I've got it. Is there anything you can do for it? And they were just like, well, I've never heard of it. Like, don't worry about it. So, and since I've been diagnosed, it's highly linked with autistic people, misophonia. So I was there in my early 20s going to the doctor saying, I think I've got misophonia because I've got this like real sound aversion to certain noises. And they were like, no, you can't have that. It's fine. You'll be fine. You work, you can function. I'm like, I function to a level, but it does get too much. So when I did eventually get a job in an office, it was stressful. It was really like, I understood the job and I was really good at it. And ended up being the go-to person. But the thing with offices is it's not just like the job, it's literally the office politics are an absolute nightmare. The unspoken rules of an office, even where you sit in an office, is just so difficult. And without a diagnosis, you can't advocate for yourself because an employer's not entitled just because you don't like gel well with a team to help you gel. It's on you. It's on you to kind of sort it out. So yeah, my first experience in an office was terrible. Hated it. Like I lasted 2.5 years there, and I ended up getting another job in another office, but it was a smaller one. And I was the employer before this one that I'm in now. So I was still not diagnosed. I got on really well initially because the team was small and it was with 3 men as well. So, we all clicked. We had our like little fallouts, but with men, they tend to, we sort it out quite quick. So it's kind of like, as long as you're open and honest with men, they tend to be like, oh, right, okay, I get it now. Like we'll work on that and stuff. But women are kind of the opposite to that, I find personally. So I was just like really getting on well and learning everything I needed to learn. I was getting pay increases, I was getting more responsibility, but they'd never like put me in a manager's role or like a supervisor's role. So they were like really happy with how you did stuff, but then they'd kind of be like, oh, you're a bit too quirky. Or because the thing with me is I go off my environment. So in my last place, there was a lot of office banter. And I hate that word banter because it can be quite go over the line quite a lot. So it blurs the lines of what's professional, what's not professional, I think. So it's hard to kind of know how to act in a way that you're not going to get into trouble or say something that's not going to go over the line. So the MD used to like come upstairs and sometimes he'd like make a comment maybe about what you're wearing or something like that. So I'd just like jump back and make a comment to him, thinking, oh, it's just, we're just having jokes, we're just having bants. And then he had me in his office and was just like, look, I feel really uncomfortable coming upstairs because sometimes you make these comments and it makes me feel a bit like, oh, that's a bit out of character or whatever. And I'm like, well, you do that to me. So like, I think it's an open game. Like if you're doing it to me, then, I'll do it back to you. So I have to be like really mindful of the fact that, I was making the owner of this company like uncomfortable. But at the same time, I was thinking, well, what you're saying to me is wrong because you come upstairs and you'll make an inappropriate comment to me. So, if you don't want the comment back, then stop making them to me because it's almost giving me permission. It's like open waters. And then that job, like what happened was someone came in that was new into the team. And it was a girl, and straight away she was like, oh, I want to be on your Facebook and I want to be on your Instagram. And I'm quite a private person on my personal socials. So I was like, well, no, I don't know you. So I'm not really, until I get to know you a little bit better, I don't really want you on my like Facebook. And she's like, yeah, but, such and such is on there. And they were, I was like, yeah, I know, but I've known them. I've been here for 5 years. Like I've known them for a while. She just couldn't handle the fact that I wouldn't add her to any of my socials. So I was like, this is a bit odd. And then after a month or so, like I found out she was getting people from like downstairs who were on my socials to like screenshot stuff on their like socials and then send it to her. And I was like, this is a bit weird. What are you doing that for? And she was just like, oh, it's just like wanted to see what you were putting. And I was just like, why do you want to see that? So like, I raised it to like my manager's attention and said, look, I'm not really happy with this. And their attitude to it was, well, you can't really do anything. What you put on your Facebook's public. And I'm like, well, actually, it's not. It's not public. She's not. No one has copyright to it. It's not actually public. It's private. And they were like, well, so I ended up having to delete everybody from my employment for my socials, and it kind of alienated me from people within the office. And it just caused a lot of friction. And in the end, what happened was one of my extended family members passed away. And I was going through like the grieving process, but it was really difficult for me to navigate it and navigate this new person as well. So it was causing too much conflict at work. So in the end, I went to the doctors and was like, look, something's just not right here. And it was kind of off the back of one of my colleagues sent me an online autism test just for fun. Like he sent it to like a few of us and I did it and scored quite high. And I was just like, well, I can't be autistic because, you know, I don't meet any of the stereotypes. Like I'm not Rain Man. I'm not excellent at math. You know, I can speak quite well. I've held down jobs. Like I don't think I can be. But the more I looked into it, the more I was like, well, actually, that does kind of make sense because I do struggle with social interaction. I can't always read a room. I get exhausted when I'm constantly around people. So I went to the doctors and asked for grief counselling. And when the counsellor, like people called me, I said, look, is there any way, how do you go about getting tested for autism? Well, why do you think you are? And I was like, yeah, but I don't know how to go about it because every time I ask the doctors, they just like dismiss it. They don't really say anything. So she was like, I'll leave it with me. And she rang me back and, you know, ran through 10 questions with me. And I scored like 7 out of 10 at these questions. And she said, well, the criteria is if you score over 6, then you get referred. And that's what got the ball rolling for me. So I had an appointment with a consultant, sent me some stuff. I had to fill out all of my childhood history in like loads of detail and all my grades and stuff like that. It was things like, you know, when did you first smile? When did you first make eye contact and stuff like that? So I had to ask my mum quite a lot of them because I wasn't sure. And then it took a year. So that got sent to me around March. And it wasn't until May, the year after, that I actually got the appointment with the consultant. And how it works over here is because I was 30 or 31, you have to bring someone that has known you from a really young age. And what they basically do is they like almost interview you, ask you a series of questions, but then they interview my mum in a different room and then they compare notes. And that's how they do it. So because my mum was saying pretty much what I was saying, they identified like the 3 criteria that you have to hit. And I got told that day, yeah, you're autistic. And I thought, brilliant. Like I felt relieved. I thought, thank God for that. Like I actually, you know, I found my place. I know what it is. And me being like really naive, like, you know, like bounced into it next day and said, oh, I've figured out why I can't like, you know, navigate with this girl and I'm struggling a bit in the office. And they were like, oh, why is that then? I was like, oh, because I'm autistic. And I sent an email to, you know, the 2 managing directors at the time, because it was a small company, and my own manager, and was like, look, I've been diagnosed with this and I think we should have a meeting to see if there's anything that we can do to, you know, going forward. And they didn't reply to the email. They didn't like respond to it. And I was a little bit like, right, well, how do I actually like navigate this situation now? Because nobody tells you how to advocate for yourself once you get diagnosed. Like nobody actually tells you what to do. I didn't really know much about like the Disability Discrimination Act or anything like that because I've only just, you know, been told I've got a disability. So I felt like I was kind of like trying to navigate it all myself and didn't really know how to advocate for myself very well. So I kind of just persevered with it because I thought, well, I was hoping that they would take more of a lead on it. Like they should know, like they're my employer, so they should know if someone has like a disability, what needs to be done. But it's a naive way of thinking, really, because a lot of people don't actually know what autism is or how it affects people until they come across somebody who's autistic and tells them like how their autism or how being autistic affects them. So that was a massive learning curve for me. And I ended up getting furloughed because over here we got furloughed. So we got like paid, but we got told to stay at home when COVID hit. So I was like, when I got furloughed, I was like not in work for 3 months. So I wasn't in that office environment for 3 months and I was never been happier. I was literally like so happy. It was like being back at school in the school holidays where you get that full break. And it really was like the break that I needed. I just needed to get off that circle of going into an office where people didn't really understand me. And then it allowed me to really research and navigate myself. So I was able to really immerse myself into the autistic community on social media. And that's where I learned, right, well, this affects me. And I can go into work now with some tools to change it. So when I got called back into work, I was like, right, this is what I need to ask for now. Like, I know what I need to ask for. And it was just so dismissive. It was just like, well, you know, we're going to move your desk downstairs, which was a noisier area of the office because that's where the sales team were. And I was like, well, that's not going to work because it's going to be too noisy. And the job I had, it was like as a processor. So I needed to concentrate. And they were like, oh, I was like, can I not just work from home? Because I was working from home just before we got furloughed. And they were like, no, we want you in because it's like team building and this, that, and the other, and all the usual qualms. I was like, I know, but I don't really want to be in. So I went in, and then it was like, oh, you talk too much, or you do this, or you do that. And I was just like, oh, this just isn't working. So I handed my notice in because I just thought, don't really want to work here anymore. It's like they're not going to ever change or accept who I am. And I feel like I get it from their point of view, because I'd worked there 5 years without much of an issue or not needing any change. So when you obviously get diagnosed and all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, actually I can't do that anymore. It's a bit like, well, you have for the past 5 years, so why should I change it now? And I was just like, you know what? I'd read a couple of things on a few autism blogs and stuff where people had a similar experience of, being diagnosed when they'd already been with an employer for a while, and it was very difficult for the changes to be put in place. So I'm now in like a new role, and I'm actually like a cold caller, which is like not what you'd like expect from someone who's autistic to be like a cold caller, but it's in the construction industry. So I'm like working in an area that I quite like, because I did a geography degree, so I understand how construction works to a point, and I'm quite nosy. I like to see what's going on. I find it really interesting. So I have like this little passion for it, and I'm getting on really well there. So when I got interviewed, I didn't actually disclose on interview that I was autistic. I just went through the interview process. Just like anyone else, you don't have to disclose. And when I on employment and receiving the contracts, there's like a little bit, I don't know if it's the same over there, but in the UK, there's like do you have a disability? And I said, yes, I'm autistic. And then it was like, any reasonable adjustments? I was like, well, I need noise cancelling headphones, and don't sit me in the middle of a bank. Like I need to be near a wall or something. Like, so I did that. And then I kind of downplayed it a little bit because I didn't want to make a massive fuss, because obviously advocating for myself with my previous employer didn't go very well. So I didn't really want to make like a massive fuss over it. But it was all right for the first like month or so, which always is, because you're navigating, it's new, it's exciting. But then when you start getting the pressure of the job and everything else, mix that in with being autistic, it becomes really, really exhausting to mask and to pretend everything's okay. And it's just, I find my tone drops and what I say becomes inappropriate and stuff. So it was creating a little bit of problems. But then we got told we need to work from home by our government here. So that helped me recharge for a month. So like I started in October, and then in November I worked from home, and then I was back in the office in December. And by the end of December, I was like, oh my God, I'm really knackered now, because I've been in the office, and I'm glad for the Christmas break. And then we were locked down for 3 months. So I was like working from home that whole time, like 3 months, and I was in a routine, and it was really good. And I was really getting on with it, and I was making really good progress in my job, and everyone was like really happy with me. But then it was like, oh, we're going to change the restrictions in April. Hence massive meltdown, massive burnout as well. In March, I went through a really bad autistic burnout, and I ended up crying to my mentor saying, I'm really, really worried about going back to the office because I just don't know if I'll cope. And I was just so fearful, because being autistic, I catastrophize. So I default to worst case straight away. So how I thought it was going to be and how it actually is two totally different things. So I was like, oh my God, I'm going to go back into this office. It's going to be really noisy. I've had like nothing but silence at home. I'm not going to cope with it. I'm going to have this massive meltdown in the middle of an office, and it's just going to be awful. So my mentor was like, right, you need to speak to your manager. So I reached out, and he was there for an hour on Teams, like, what's wrong? And I was like, I'm just really worried, and ended up having a meeting with HR, and that got the ball rolling for me. So I sent some links from the Autism Society website, because they do actually have a really helpful links on there for employers. It's like really, really well laid out. So I sent them a couple of links about employers and what they can do to help autistic people. They actually read it. So when I had the meeting with HR, they were like, right, okay, well, this is what we think we can do, and don't worry about coming back in. We'll work with you to do it. And then I spoke to like the research manager, and he'd read it as well. So it was just so nice to actually speak to someone that had actually read the material. And any employer who has like an autistic person that they employ, and they send you any material, what I would suggest is you need to read it before you have any meetings with them. It gets you both on the same page for what's needed, and it makes it so much easier going forward. So when I was like explaining to him, well, I needed to be in a quieter area of the office, and he was like, yeah, but you need to be in a quieter area but still feel like you're part of the team, don't you? And I was like, yes, that's it, that's exactly it. So they were like, well, where were you thinking of sitting? So it was things like that, you know. They were asking me, if you thought about where you want to sit, and I was like, yeah, I like towards the back of the office but facing the door, because that helps me. And then he was like, you know, you don't want to be in the gangway, do you? Because that's going to be too distracting, and you don't want to be in the middle. And I was like, no, exactly. Yeah, that is exactly it. I don't want to be in those like areas. And so it was just really, really helpful. It was really productive conversation. And then it came to a point where, because obviously everyone was going back to work, and I was like, you know, maybe I should come back in whilst people are still working from home when it's a bit quieter, and start that way. So they literally let me plan my own return. So I was like, well, this is how I want to do it. So like one day this week, and then next week 2 days for a couple of weeks, and then 3. And then I did it all like myself. And they're like, yeah. And then they were like, went even further, like above and beyond, and were saying, don't feel under pressure to be in 5 days a week. So if you find that you're like struggling, don't feel that pressure of you've got to be in. And obviously the restrictions are changing again. I've already been told you are on a different plan to everyone else. So even though like I was in 5 days this week, like I was actually in and, you know, achieved my target, I think on the Tuesday, I said to my manager, I'm just not feeling it. And I've recognized now that when I'm not feeling it, that means to me something's off. So it's a potential warning sign of a burnout or potential meltdowns. And it's where I need to maybe look at what I'm doing to see where I can recharge that. I just basically was like, you know, I'm not feeling it. He's like, what do you mean? And he was misunderstanding, thinking, oh, it's because like you're not hitting target or work's not going well. And I was like, no, I'm not feeling it because it's taking like immense effort for me to do anything. It's literally like taking an immense effort to just even focus or make a call, or everything's just taking too much effort that it shouldn't like be this much effort. So I was like, if I feel like this tomorrow, so I was basically negotiating with him saying, if I feel like this tomorrow, just let you know, I'm going to need to work from home like the day after, just to see if I can like recharge and then be back in. And he was like, do you know what? That's fine. Like, you know, I can see you're going to try and come in tomorrow and see how it goes. And because of that, because I went in the next day and I was okay, I didn't work from home the day after because I didn't need to. So it's kind of like having that trust there, like them letting me manage it and feeling like I'm in control of it. Whereas I feel like a lot of employers fall down because they're too rigid with what they want the employer to do. So rather than treat the employer like an adult, which is what we are, we're adults at the end of the day, and listen to them, they go, well, no, we need you in because that's the rules for everybody. And yes, it's the rules for everybody, but when you do have a disability or even like, you know, mental health issues such as depression and social anxiety and things like that, you really need to listen to what your employee is saying. If that employee, so if they're performing well at home or performing really well doing what works for them, then let them do it. Like, don't try and force it on them to be like, oh, you need to be in, you need to be doing this. Obviously, there's certain things that can't really be changed, so like working hours. So for me, I like working at night. It's where I come alive, is at night. But obviously my job is, you know, 8:30 till 5, Monday to Friday. And I can't change that because most people go home, like in the construction industry, architects, things like that, they all go home at 5 o'clock anyway, 5, 6 o'clock. So it wouldn't work for me to say, oh, you know, I work best at night, so I need to like, you know, work between 6 and 2 or something like that. It just wouldn't work. I wouldn't get any success with my calls. So for that, like, it's obviously me choosing to do that job in those hours, and I'm able to do that. But when employers just totally disregard it and say, no, it's fine, because what we'll do is we'll just give you some like noise cancelling headphones and that's it. You will be treated the same as everyone else. It's really difficult to thingy. So my employer helped me because I was like, I need to tell the rest of the team because none of my team know because of the bad experience I had in my previous employer. And my managers helped me to, you know, disclose on a meeting in the morning, and then they let me do a blog as well. And then they basically advertise that within their platform. So like, I'm openly autistic in the office, and it's actually the best thing I've ever done, because I know not everybody who's autistic likes to be open about it in an office environment. But what I would say is when you're not, you're basically double masking, because you're trying to hide the fact that you're autistic anyway. You're trying to like, you know, accommodate people by masking. But when you're lying about, well, not lying, but like when you're not being open and honest about being autistic, when you get it wrong and say something inappropriate or do something wrong, it then causes friction. Whereas because I've been so open and honest and say, I don't always get it right, you need to tell me straight away if I've overstepped a boundary or it's a professional line cross. It makes me more comfortable anyway. So I don't find myself as exhausted when I get home, because people are accepting of me and they appreciate the effort that I put in, because they're like, we can see how much effort you put in to communicate with people. And I get told on a day-to-day basis, like, the way you communicate is absolutely excellent, like with people on the phone and, people in the office. And that's the irony of me, because I'm autistic and struggle with communication. But when put in the right environment and supported with the right tools, I'm able to exceed the expectation that's laid out for me. So I'm not on a different target to any of my other colleagues. I'm on exactly the same target and I get treated exactly the same. The level of work that I output is the same as my other colleagues. And I feel like because they appreciate the effort I put in, the other colleagues don't treat me any differently. And I'm pretty sure where I work as well, even if that was the case and I was on a reduced target for whatever reason, I would still be treated and held in the same weight as everybody else. So it's just like been really refreshing, this new employer. So I'm working in an open office and, achieving what I need to achieve, but it's only because the employers listened to me and made those adaptations. And I know a lot of like people with disabilities and physical disabilities as well, they've all really appreciated this working from home. But one of the things it has highlighted is the fact that employers have always been able to provide these accommodations, but it wasn't until Boris actually forced them to do it that they were like, all right, we're going to have to get laptops and everyone's going to have to work from home. And I know a lot of people with disabilities have felt cheated almost, just because it's like, oh, right, well, you could have always done it, but you just didn't really want to put that effort into me. It's just a shame, really, because like employers, if I was to start a business, you have a responsibility to the people you employ. They're making you basically rich. They're making you a lot of money. So for you to not invest in them is wrong. It should be, right, I value this person. I've obviously taken them under my wing because they've got the experience or they've shown tenacity in the interview. So I want to like make sure that that's right, but they don't. There's some really, really good employers, but there's also some really, really not good employers that will just literally do the bare minimum for an employee. So they'll just do it because it's the law. So they're just like, oh yeah, you can have like 20 days holiday a year plus bank holidays. And like, well, that's the law. Like that's what you have to give anyway. So it's not like, my company that I work for is really a generous company with a generous like benefits package as well. So they are like, it's a two-way thing. That's what they always say to me. It works two ways. So if you come to us with something, then we'll work with you to help it fix. And that's how it should be. It's adults, isn't it? It shouldn't be any different.
Yeah. And what you say is so true. Like if an employer employs you and you're an adult, you should be able to kind of manage. Like I read it somewhere, I think on your blog that you say, I have a household, I buy a car, I manage my life. Why shouldn't I be able to manage my own job? And I know what I need to deliver. And as long as you hit your targets, why do they need to micromanage you? And why does it matter where you do your job from at this point? And I think, yeah, as you say, people with disabilities. And I think if you have a diagnosis, an official one, that helps you advocate for yourself. But I'm also thinking about, single moms, for example. Why would they have to also be there at this specific time if they actually, all they need is a little bit more flexibility, isn't it? And especially now when you say people with disability, like raising awareness that you actually can only really function if you get this kind of trust and flexibility. Do you also want to share a little bit about the autistic burnout you mentioned on your website? It was quite new to me to hear, and like how you prevent it.
It's not really a medical thing. So like if you went to a doctor and said, I suffer with autistic burnout, they probably wouldn't know what it is. So I really wouldn't recommend going to a doctor and saying it, because you end up educating the doctor on what it is rather than like them educating you. But so because autistic people, they have to basically put a mask on when they leave the house or whenever they go in a social setting, which takes a lot of effort. So I always say to like my employer, I basically do two jobs, like not one. So I'm doing like the job you expect of me, but I'm also doing like another job where I'm expected to be professional, be courteous, be kind, and all the things that you should be anyway, but don't come naturally. They're all learned. So all my communication skills are learned through observation of what other people are doing. And it just gets really, really exhausting. So there comes a point where you kind of get over exhausted with it. And the only way, I think I described it on one of my blogs, it's like Windows safe mode. So when the computer's been doing too much all at once, and then all of a sudden it goes, oh my God, no, shut down, safe mode. That's kind of like what my brain does. So it'll get to a point where it'll be too much, all too consuming. And it's like my feelings detach from my body, and I'll just function like a really basic robot, basically. So I can function to a point so I'll be able to, like, you know, drive or go to a shop, but it'll be very basic, and I won't really communicate with people in the same way. So I won't put that effort into talking. I won't be all happy, smiley. Sometimes as well, like work, I'll take my breaks at a different time, and it's just to avoid the social interaction of a break room, which my managers, it's one of my like reasonable adjustments, is that I don't have to take breaks when everyone else does. I can take them like at different times. And as I explained to my manager, he was like, why do you sometimes do that? And I was like, because although I am quite chatty and things, sometimes I just need that recharge where I'm not in a break room basically faking my way through conversation or trying to overstretch myself a little bit. So that's one of the ways I prevent burnout, is I kind of recognize, okay, I've done quite a lot this week. I've overstretched myself. I've even like things like social media and Instagram and LinkedIn. I try and limit my time on those. So I may blog once a week on LinkedIn, and I'll do that on a Saturday night. So it's normally released on a Saturday night and goes out like that night for everyone to read in the morning. And then I tend to like reply to comments throughout the Sunday, but then I'll leave it for the week. I'll like dip in and out of it, but I won't be like on it all the time, because it can get quite addictive and your phone has notifications coming up all the time and stuff like that. But one of the things I do as well is like I put my phone on do not disturb mode. So like if I get notifications, I don't see them come up, so I'm not tempted to go into it. Quite like strict with myself with it. And then I do sports as well. So sports, like, I don't know if you've heard of stimming before.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. But you can please explain it.
So like my stim is basically sports. So it's where I can like move my body how I want to move it in a relaxing and repetitive motion. So swimming and running are two really relaxing and repetitive motions for me. So I just like go for a run and just let my mind wander and do what I need to do. But then there'll be sometimes when I train, it'll be structured. So I find that quite relaxing as well, especially because it's like numbers. So if I'm doing like a set in the pool of like 10, 100, the way my brain works is totally different to how everyone else's brain works. Like my manager said to me, what do you work in? Do you work in kilometers or miles? I was like, oh, I work in both. And he was like, what do you mean you work in both? And I was just like, oh, if I'm running and it's like, you know, 7 miles, I'll do 11.2K. But if I'm a bit knackered and I want to do like just 6 miles, I'll just do like 9.6K. But then I think, oh, I could just like top that up to 10K. It's a bit more of a rounded number. And he's just like, no, I don't understand how you do that. And it's just a numbers thing. Like, let's not go there. So it's just kind of like, it has to be like a rounded, even number. So it'll either be like 6 miles or 10K or 7 miles, and then I'm like in my head, I'm going, like 1.6 is like a mile, and that's like 1.6K, and just kind of like round it all up. And I quite enjoy running and doing that. So it's like, I know someone else as well, like when they're doing marathons, they're not neurodivergent, but they'll look at the watch and they can try and like add up. So they'll like try and do maths from like the time on the watch. They'll just like add it up. So if it's like 1 hour, like they'll go 60 and then times whatever, and they'll try and like do little calculations just to keep them going. So I find I do that as well. And the problem with burnout is it's really difficult to it's difficult to manage, because being autistic, I don't know how I feel like at any given time. It's really bizarre, and it's not something that was pointed out to me until my consultant said, you know, do you actually like feel happy or sad and I'm like, no. When I actually thought about it, I was like, no. It's normally like quite extreme. So if I've done something really well that I'm proud of, I'm literally like bouncing and like, yeah, like, and then if I'm really like angry or sad, I literally like, I show that through lashing out or hitting something, which I don't do anymore because like now I know I'm autistic, I have better ways to manage that. But it's kind of like really bizarre. And then, but because you're so out of tune with how you feel, by the time burnout hits, it's very difficult to kind of prevent it. So I think I said earlier about on Tuesday, I wasn't feeling it in work. And that's how I've now recognized an impending burnout or that something's not right. So if I'm not feeling it, it means that I'm really struggling to mask, or I'm really struggling to just function. I lose, like, I think they call it executive function. So I lose my executive function. It takes me longer to process things. When someone's talking to me, I won't really hear it. And it's a lot of effort. And that to me is like a massive warning sign of, okay, something's off. And my manager's like, what do you think? I said, well, I'm going to the gym tonight. So, I'll see what happens at the gym and swim in. And I had a really good gym and swim session, which is my stim. So because of that, it boosted my mood for the next day. And I was able to really push through. And I've not suffered the burnout that I thought I was going to have. So that's an achievement for me, because that's the first time I've ever managed to kind of recognize that something's off. But I think it's just because I'm so open and honest at work, and I have that open dialogue where I can just be like, I'm just not feeling it today. And then I get the support that I need off my manager. Whereas if I wasn't open and honest about being autistic, it would be, are you in a mood? Or, do you know what I mean? Like, it would be like, what you in a mood about? Or what's wrong with you today? Are you tired? Or something like that. Whereas if you can just turn around and be like, well, I'm not feeling it, something's off, and I think I'm gonna have to like take some time to just recharge. It allows your manager to be aware, okay, she's like having a bad day. And what I've had to really do is say to my manager, look, just because I can do something one day, it does not mean that the next day I'll be able to do it. And I used to go to the doctors and say, look, I think I'm going mad. And they were like, what do you mean you think you're going mad? I'm like, well, I've been to school and I've got all these qualifications, and it was all done in a classroom setting. But as soon as I'm in like a meeting in an actual physical room, one-on-one, and a manager's talking to me, nothing they say goes in my brain. Like, it's really bizarre. It's just like, I'm in the meeting, I'm interacting, and I walk out of that room and I pretty much forget everything that the manager has said to me. And I was chatting to my counsellor about it, because I have a private counsellor that I pay for. And he was like, the reason why that is because you're trying to give eye contact because you're being polite. So you give eye contact in the meeting. It's not natural to you to do. And then subconsciously, your brain's trying to figure out the mannerisms of the face to work out how what you're saying is relaying to them, which means that when they're speaking to you, your brain is not focused on what they're saying. It's focused on, one, doing the eye contact thing, and then two, reading the facial expressions of the person. So when they're speaking, it's like all the words just float by. So I like spoke to my manager and was like, look, in our one-to-one meetings that we have every month, it's like, we're gonna have to try some different tactics. And he was like, why? And I was like, because basically when I'm in the meeting with you, I just forget everything that you said. It's like, so what you're saying is you need some like minutes after the meeting. I was like, yeah, minutes would be good, like for like after, so I can just read through them. Because it is a delay process. So if something's said, it can sometimes take me like 3 days, and then I'll be like, oh, do you know that thing you were talking about the other day? I've had time to think about that now, and I'm ready to discuss it. And they're just like, right, okay, let's talk about it then. Whereas other people are expected to kind of understand it straight away. It's like with me, it just takes me a little bit of time, and I question it to death as well. So we've had something change recently, and I'm like, so does that mean that if that happens, then this happens? And there's just like, oh, she's trying to process this now. I can see the cogs like turning in the brain. And it's just because I like to know every little detail and understand it fully, so I know that I'm not going to get it wrong. And that's pretty much what I was like at school when we were given an instruction on how to do something, which is, looking back now, it's quite funny. But I used to think, oh, I can't be that clever, because I'm constantly asking people like, oh, so do we do this? Or like, how is it meant to be? And teachers would get really frustrated with me, because I was just like, I don't understand the question. This maths questions are like the worst when they're phrased in a way that Jenny has 3 lollipops and Bob has 4. If Jenny takes 3, well, how many's Bob left with? And you're just like, what? Like, you just look at the question like,
exactly. And what flavors are they? And are they the same size?
Yeah, and you're just looking like, well, what's this? It's like trying to read between the lines, and it's like, why can't it just be a simple like, yeah, like 4 take 3, it's 1. Like, why can't it just be that rather than have to have like a big sentence of, oh, you know, Jenny and Bob have these sweets and they're going to share them, and there's 3 red and 4 blue, and you're just looking at it going, oh, I don't understand. And teachers would just be like, what do you mean you don't understand? Like, I just don't understand the question. It just, and I still don't to this day as an adult understand things like that. And I remember once, you know, teachers would be like, oh, we were learning, I think they're called cinnamons or something like that. Like, you know, too many cooks spoil the broth and those types of sayings. So we were learning.
Or like word plays or like.
Yeah, like, so you have like, there's loads of little sayings like too many cooks spoil the broth and stuff. And I just piped up, well, what are we cooking? And I didn't realise, like, and I got sent out because they thought I was being like funny, like trying to be funny. But I was just literally like, well, you said too many cooks spoil the broth. So I was asking like, you know, what they were cooking. And it's basically like, it's basically another way of saying something like, so if you have like too many people on one project, it can become over like diluted sort of thing, but it's just a different way of phrasing it. So like, I literally, if someone says stuff to me, I'm like, I don't understand, you're gonna have to explain it. It's the same with jokes as well. If my manager says a joke, I'm like, I don't get it. I'll just be like deadpan, like, no, I don't understand. And he's just like, what do you mean? And then he's just like, it's not funny if you have to explain it. I'm like, well, it's not a funny joke then. I don't understand. So it's just having that constant like communication there for people to know. It's really important to me to, like, for people to understand. It's when people refuse to understand that it frustrates me.
Yeah, I can really see that and relate. Like, if you're trying to advocate and really try to make an effort on your end to make yourself understood, and if people then don't read an article that you sent them as an employer, for example, right? So I'm really happy to hear that you really found a great way for yourself to manage with your employer and your managers to come to an understanding. I could talk forever.
Yeah, same.
And I see it's already an hour almost. So I have like, well, 2 more questions. One would be, if people are now interested to read your blog or your website, where can people find you?
So I've got like my own website, which I manage myself. It's www.autisms-allright.co.uk. And then I'm also on Instagram as well, which is autisms_allright. And I'm on LinkedIn. So if you search Lucy Knight on LinkedIn, I'm on there as well. So yeah, those 3 platforms. Don't really use Facebook. So Facebook's it's another world.
That's okay. But that's really great. So people can see and especially read your articles, because they're really, really great for me as well to like understand like the inner world of what you went through and why it's so important also for employers to understand the needs of people with autism. And sometimes people don't even know about it, right? As you didn't know for the longest time.
It's just little things as well. Like I read some, like, there's like some autistic people, they can't wear office wear because it's like the sensory textures of office wear. So, you know, even just going to interviews for some autistic people is really difficult, just because they're most comfortable in tracksuit. And if they turn up to an interview in a tracksuit, it's going to look really odd. So it's just kind of like breaking those barriers down. I mean, I did disclose on a couple of interviews that I had for new jobs that I was autistic in an interview, but I did it at the end. So, you know, it's normally the point where it's like, do you have any further questions for us? I thought, I'm going to just like test the waters on this and see what happens. It was normally like jobs where I was like, I'm not really fussed if I get that or not. So I just thought, I'm just going to test it out. And I'd just say, oh, look, just to let you know, like, I am autistic and I would need like reasonable adjustments. I just want to see like what kind of culture you have and promote at your business. Like I said, I didn't disclose on the job that I'm in now in interview, but I found that when I do on interview, they are like taken aback a little bit, because like, oh wow, you did really well, you know, in the interview process. But then actually all the ones that I've disclosed to have gone, there's no judgment here, and this is what we can offer you. And I got offered a job where they were like, yeah, we're happy to like accommodate it, but you can't work from home. Mm-mm. And I turned the job down because I thought that office is way too small. And I didn't really like that. Well, we will accommodate it. You can wear your headphones in the office, but you can't work from home. I thought that was a bit unflexible. So I was just like, because it's got to be right for you, but it's got to be right for them as well. So it's just, I think that's important. But I know not everyone's brave enough or confident enough to kind of disclose. And that's kind of what needs to change. Like, there shouldn't really be any like bias. It should just be on how you can do the job. And I get kind of fed up with people on LinkedIn saying, you'll see comments off managers saying, oh yeah, they've got to be a right fit. It's not just about how well they can do the job. They've got to be the right fit. They've got to fit in with the team. Well, the thing is, like, I can fit into any team because I mirror that behavior. It's not like really an issue. The only teams I don't fit into are the toxic ones that tend to be, quite bitchy or and things like that. So I think employers can do a lot more, like a hell of a lot more, to just be more. I think they like really are missing like a trick.
Yeah. So, and some closing words. Is there anything else that you would like people to know, or something you wish you knew earlier?
I definitely wish I was diagnosed earlier. I just think it would have helped. It would have helped me navigate employment better. I don't think it would have helped me in school so much, because I think once you do have a label in school, it's kind of, I don't know, like I don't know whether my teachers would have been like, oh, we're going to put you in like lower stats, or we're not sure you'll be capable of this work. Or so I was like kind of glad that I didn't have a label at school, because it helped me improve my social skills. I feel like sometimes when people have a label, it's a bit like, we're going to excuse your behavior rather than help you change it. We'll just excuse it because you've got a label. That's not really setting someone up for an employment, if that makes sense. But I feel if I did have the diagnosis earlier, I would have picked a completely different career path than what I'm on now. Although everything happens for a reason, I'm quite happy in the career that I'm in now. So it's like not like terrible, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and for being so open and giving a glimpse into your own story. And I think there's definitely people out there, able to relate and able to realize, well, I'm not alone in this journey. And it's not me, like, as you say, you felt different, and then you always question yourself, but it's not you. It's just your brain is wired a little bit differently. And so that's it.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons why I created the website as well, was because when I got diagnosed, there wasn't everything all in one place. Does that make sense? So it's quite hard to like educate myself. So I thought, I'm going to create a website that maybe could offer help to someone that's newly diagnosed. And, there's links on there to, Scope and different organizations. And then I've got links on there as well to accounts that have helped me. So there's like a link on my website that it basically it's like top 20 accounts that have helped me on Instagram, just to give someone a starting point. Because it's only from all other autistics that I've learned all about autism, not from a doctor. So,
Yeah, that's one other thing that you mentioned is like the doctors were kind of dismissive for a long time. It was you that had to kind of push for a diagnosis and push for getting the support you need. And I think that's also something to mention, like the doctors know something, but they might not be the almighty knowing people. So listen to yourself and listen to your gut and do your own research.
Yeah, basically, like if you think something's off, but you might think you've got depression or anxiety or ADHD or anything like that, just arm yourself with as much research as possible and then go to the doctors. So basically you can just tell them like, this is what's going on. And I think, because at the end of the day, they can't say no, or the worst that they can say is no, but most would be like, okay, yeah, we'll, because you keep coming back with the same thing, we will like, research it a bit further for you.
Well, so thank you very much. And obviously we're going to stay in contact, and
Yeah.
have a wonderful day. So
You too. Thank you. Bye.
what an incredible story. And thank you, Lucy, for sharing. I'm so happy and really grateful for you to share your very personal story of your journey and finding out about autism and learning the vocabulary and learning to advocate for yourself and learning who you are and what your needs are so that you can communicate and that you can voice what you need in order to thrive at your job. So thank you again for sharing. And I believe there are a few people out there who probably need to hear this, because if you don't know, you just get irritated. You just cannot cope probably in certain situations. As she was pointing out, she called it these burnouts. And if you don't know what's going on, it's really hard for you to advocate. And that's why I believe when she talks about a disability and also having your employer being able to make accommodations for you, that having an official diagnosis helps you to get these accommodations, I believe. So again, if you want to hear more about the topic of twice exceptionality, then join the first ever 2E Adults Conference, and the link you'll find below. And if you would like to reach out, if you have any comments, if you just want to say hello, then write at hello@unleashmonday.com, and you find the episode and all the show notes and all the information you find on the website at unleashmonday.com. So yeah, thank you for listening and for your trust. And I'm super excited that you're here and educating yourself. So thank you so much. And I see you in 2 weeks. Bye.